Okay, so we want to control or handle errors in our handlers. We don't want to add the logic inside our API controllers, but we don't have the ability to return something like an HTTP error response from our handlers because they're not inside an API controller. So how do we deal with this? Well, there's a few different types of approaches to this, and the approach that we're going to take in our application is we're going to return, instead of the activity, we're going to return a result object. And inside the core folder, what we'll do is we'll create a new C# class and simply call it result. And this result class is going to have some properties, and we'll have a boolean for is success. And we'll have a property, and what we'll use here, because our result object is going to be used for any of our entities, so we're going to give it a generic type, and we specify the generic type in angle brackets here. And then we can specify that this property is going to be a type of t, and it's going to be the value. So when we're using generic types in this way, then we'll specify when we create a new instance of this class, the t would be swapped with activity, for instance, when we use it. And then our value is going to be of type activity. And what we'll also have is a prop of type string and specify error. And inside here, we're going to have a couple of static methods. So we're going to say public static, and we're going to return a result instance of type t from this, and we'll call this one success. And we'll pass in t value as a parameter, and we're going to return a new result of type t, and we're going to set the properties is success equals to true, and the value is going to equal the value, whatever it is. And we're going to add another public static result of type t, and we're going to call this one failure. And this is going to be passed a string of the error as a parameter. And we're going to specify new result of type t, and we're going to say is success equals false in the case of failure, and the error is equal to error. Now in the case of what we're looking at right now, so I try and get a non-existent activity, then our activity value is either going to be the activity because we've found the value, or it's going to be null. So when we look at this result object, then we're going to test to see what the value is, and if the value is null, then we can return a not found. If the value is not null, we can return the activity. And the failure response gives us an option to do some logic based on whether or not something has gone wrong inside the handler itself. So let's take a look at the details handler first of all. How can we use our new result object? Well, first of all, we're not going to be returning just an activity now. What we're going to return is a result of type activity. And we'll need to bring in result from application core. And then we need to specify result here, again, of type activity. And then finally, in our task that we're returning, this is going to be a result of type activity. And then what we can do is let's remove this logic, and we're going to return the result of type activity, and we're going to choose the success, and we're going to pass in the activity. We're not going to specify failure. If we don't find the activity, we're not going to check at this stage because we don't need to. Our activity is either going to be the activity or it's going to be null, and that's going to be returned inside this result success object. But then we do need to test the result itself inside our activities controller to see what kind of response we've got from it. So what we can do is we can head over to our activities controller. Now we're not returning an activity, or we are returning an activity, but what we're going to use is instead of action result of a type, we're just going to use iAction result. And this allows us to return, instead of the type of thing, it allows us to return HTTP responses. So what we can do is say var result equals, and then we're going to have our result object inside this particular variable, And then what we can do is check to see what the result is. And we can add an if statement saying if result is success and results.value is not equal to null, then we can return OK and we can return the result.value. And that's going to be our activity in this case. We could also add another if statement and say if result is success and the results.value is equal to null, then in this case we can return not found. And if neither of these conditions are true, then we know we've got a result that is not success, and we can return a bad request, and we can specify the results.error inside here. So with this in place, what we can do now is we can head back to Postman, and if we try again to get a non-existent activity and click send, then we still get the 404 not found. But what we should also find if we try and get an activity that does exist, so I'm just going to click on get activities to get a legitimate ID of an activity, and just copy this into my clipboard, and go on to the get activity and just overwrite the GUID here and click on send, then we still get our activity back okay. So we've now got the ability to handle a not found, but I still don't want the logic inside the individual activities controller making each of these methods look quite large. So what we can do is we can move this logic into our base API controller or into a method inside our base API controller and then just use that. So what we can do, I'm just going to open up the base API controller and let's just go ahead and add a new method inside here. And it's going to be protected because we only need this available in list class and any derived classes. We're going to return an action result, and we're going to call this handle result. And it's going to be of type T. And it's going to take a result as a parameter of type T, and we'll call this result. And let's just bring in result from application core. And then what we can do is just go and cut our logic out of our API controller and paste this inside here and just reformat. And then what we can do is make use of this particular method, pass it the result, and then we're going to get the response back from our handle result method here. So we can go back to our activities controller. And then what we can say is return handle results, and we can pass in the results. And what we should find is that our logic continues to work. And if we go back to Postman and let's try the good request first of all to go and get an activity, we see the activity coming back. And if we get the non-existent activity again, click on send, then we've still got our not found logic working as well. And what we can do is actually we don't need to go and get the result and put it in a variable here. We can simply cut the request to mediator and pass that into the parameter of our handle results. And then we're back to a single line, but we're also handling our HTTP error responses here as well. And if we go back just to confirm, we can click on send and the not found still happens as it should do. So what we'll take a look at next is we'll update the rest of our API controller methods to use this new result object for both our commands and our queries.